She was asked to play a simple melody. What happened next left everyone speechless. Nobody in that room was expecting anything special that evening. It was just a regular school spring recital. The kind where parents come in, sit on plastic chairs that are slightly too small, clap politely after each performance, and check the time on their phones when they think no one is looking. 200 people had showed up that night to watch kids play piano pieces they had been practicing for months. Some would forget the notes halfway through. Some would rush to finish. A few would actually do well. That was the plan. That was what everyone expected. Nobody expected what happened when a teacher walked onto that stage. Her name was Nadia. She was 34 years old, and she had been teaching piano at that small-town elementary school for 3 years. Most parents had seen her at drop-off or in the hallway. A quiet woman, always with a warm smile, always carrying a tote bag full of sheet music. She never talked much about herself. She just taught her students, encouraged them, stayed late when a child needed extra help, and then went home. Nobody really knew her story, and she had never offered it. But here is what Nadia's story actually was. She had been a child prodigy. By 12, she had won regional competitions 3 times. By 14, she was being talked about in music circles as someone who had real potential, the kind of potential that turns into a proper career on a real stage in a real city. Music was not just something she was good at, it was the thing she lived inside. She once told her mother that when she played, she didn't feel like she was making sound. She felt like she was talking in a language that didn't need words. Her mother cried when she said that, because it was the most honest thing she had ever heard a child say. Then, when Nadia was 15, she got an ear infection. It sounds so small when you write it like that. An ear infection. Something that most people get once or twice in their lives, take some medicine for, and then forget about. But Nadia's was different. It was severe. It came fast, and by the time the doctors understood what was happening, it had already caused real damage. She lost 70% of her hearing in her left ear, 40% in her right. Not all at once. Gradually, over 2 weeks, which was almost worse, because she could feel it going. She was 15 years old, and the world had gone quiet. Her family didn't have much money. Her mother sold the piano to pay the medical bills. Nadia never said anything about it. She just watched 2 men carry it out of the house one morning. and then she went back inside and sat in the empty corner where it used to be. For years after that, she stayed away from music completely, not because she hated it, because she loved it too much. She couldn't stand being near it and not being fully inside it the way she used to be. She studied to become a teacher instead. She told herself it was a practical choice. She told herself she was fine with it. She wasn't fine with it. But she kept going anyway, because that is what you do. Eventually, slowly, she found her way back. Not as a performer, but as a teacher. She discovered that she could still hear enough to teach. She learned to listen with what she had left. She learned to watch hands instead of just ears, to notice the tension in a student's wrist, the angle of their fingers, the way their shoulder dropped when they were relaxed versus when they were nervous. She got good at it, really good. Her students loved her, even if they didn't know why. She just had a way of making them feel safe. She wore a small hearing aid in her left ear. She had never told her students about it. She never told most of the parents either. It wasn't a secret exactly. She just never brought it up. It wasn't the part of herself she led with. Now, there was a girl in her class named Ria, 8 years old, tiny for her age, with the kind of serious face that made adults instantly want to be more careful around her. Ria had been taking lessons with Nadia for 6 months, and she was doing well, genuinely well, but she had one big problem. She was terrified of performing in front of people. 3 weeks before the recital, Ria broke down during practice. Not a little cry. A full collapse into sobs, her hands pressed flat on the keys like she was trying to hold herself up. "I can't do it," she said. "What if I forget everything? What if everyone looks at me and I just freeze? I'd rather not go at all." Nadia sat down on the bench next to her. She didn't say, "You'll be fine," or "Everyone gets nervous." She had heard those words herself once, and they had never helped. Instead, she took Ria's small hand and pressed it flat against the wooden frame of the piano. Not the keys, just the wood. "Feel that?" she said quietly. Ria frowned. "I don't feel anything." "Wait." Nadia played a single low note with her other hand. The wood vibrated. Ria's eyes went wide. "That's the music inside the piano," Nadia said. "It doesn't care if you make a mistake. It doesn't care who's watching. It just wants to move. You're not performing for those people out there. You're just letting the music move through you. That's all it is." Two days later, Ria went to Principal Sharma's office after school. The principal later said she had never seen an 8-year-old look so determined walking through a door. She only ever teaches, but she should play. Someone should ask her. Principal Sharma thought about it, then agreed. He pulled Nadia aside the next morning and told her the plan. Nadia went very still for a moment. Then she said she would think about it. She thought about it for a week. Then she said yes. On the night of the recital, backstage, Principal Sharma noticed something he had never noticed before. He saw Nadia adjusting a small device in her ear before she went on, and he suddenly understood, really understood, what he hadn't known all this time. He pulled her aside, his voice low. "Nadia, I didn't realize. We don't have to do this." "I can tell them something came up. Nobody has to know anything." She smiled at him in a way that was completely calm and slightly amused. "Nobody needs to know anything," she agreed. And she walked out from behind the curtain. The audience barely reacted when she sat down. Some people were still settling into their seats. A couple of parents were whispering to each other. Someone's phone buzzed and they glanced at it. Nadia sat at the piano and did something nobody understood right away. She didn't put her hands on the keys. She placed both palms flat on the wooden frame of the instrument and closed her eyes. She stayed like that for 3 or 4 seconds, just feeling it. Then she began to play. What came out of that piano was not a simple melody. It was Chopin, a nocturne, slow, aching, full of the kind of quiet emotion that doesn't announce itself loudly, but gets inside you anyway. The piece she had last performed publicly at 15, the night before her hearing started to go. The piece she had not played for anyone in 19 years. The first few notes made people look up from their phones. By the end of the first minute, nobody was looking at anything except her. There was something about the way she played that was hard to describe afterward. It wasn't showy. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She swayed slightly as she played, her eyes closed most of the time, her foot sensing the pedal through the floor. She made 2 small mistakes, missed a note once, slowed down slightly in one passage, and kept going as though they hadn't happened. Because to her, they hadn't. The music was still moving. That was what mattered. A father in the 3rd row reached over and held his wife's hand without realizing he'd done it. An older woman near the back closed her eyes and pressed her lips together. One of the older students, a boy of about 12 who had been loudly bored all evening, sat completely still with his mouth slightly open. The piece lasted about 4 minutes. When the last note faded, the room didn't move. There were 4 full seconds of complete silence. Then Ria, sitting in the 2nd row, still in her performance dress, stood up and started clapping. She was the only one standing for maybe 2 seconds. Then her mother stood. Then the father who had been holding his wife's hand. Then someone in the back. Then the whole room was on its feet, and the applause lasted nearly 2 minutes, which in a room full of people who had somewhere to be afterward, is a very long time. Principal Sharma, still standing in the wings, found that he could not say a single word. Nadia stood from the bench and looked out at those 200 people. She didn't cry. She didn't put her hand over her mouth like people do in movies. She just stood there and let it land. Let herself feel it, finally, after all that time. She gave one small nod, like she was saying thank you to the room, to the piano, to the 19 years it had taken to get back to this moment. After the recital, people stayed for a long time. Parents came up to her one after another. Some didn't know what to say, so they just grabbed her hand. A few people asked questions, and that was when most of the room finally learned about her hearing, not from her, but from each other, in small conversations that spread quietly across the room. The reactions were different. Some people were surprised. Some were emotional. One mother went home and cried for reasons she couldn't fully explain to her husband, except to say that she kept thinking about all the times she'd given up on something because it had become hard. A teenager who had been considering quitting violin that week went home and practiced for 3 hours without being asked. And Ria, little Ria, 8 years old, who had started all of this, found Nadia before she left that night and tugged on her sleeve. "I told you," she said simply. Nadia looked down at her. "You told me what?" "That you should play. You just needed someone to ask." In the weeks that followed, Nadia's life shifted in small but real ways. A music school nearby reached out about running a workshop. A community radio show asked for a short interview. A sound engineer who had known her as a teenager contacted her about new hearing technology, bone conduction devices that might help her hear more fully than she had in years. She said yes to the workshop. She kept most of her life the same. When the radio host asked her what she would tell someone who felt like they had lost the thing that made them who they were, she was quiet for a long time. "I didn't lose the music," she finally said. "I just had to learn to carry it differently." 3 months after the recital, Ria walked into her weekly lesson and found something new in the corner of the room. The upright piano from the school hall, moved in on a permanent loan. Nadia was already sitting at the bench. She patted the spot beside her. "Sit," she said. "Let's see what this one sounds like."